They'll tell you the crackdown on the nonhumans was the work of kings and captains. It wasn't. It was the work of clerks. It always is. So let me tell you about a clerk. My name is Aldous, and for 11 years I balanced the books for a dwarf. And I want to tell you what it cost me. Not the 11 years. The 11 seconds at the end. Golan Vivaldi's bank stood in the trade quarter, which is to say, it stood where it wasn't wanted. A dwarf's coin built half the merchants up that hill, and half the merchants up that hill would cross the street to avoid saying good morning to the dwarf who'd lent it. That was the arrangement. They needed his vaults and despised his beard. The same men, often the same hour. I learned early that a man can owe you his fortune and hate you for the holding of it. I was the human face of the place. That was the use of me. A merchant who couldn't stomach dealing with a non-human could deal with me. And Golan knew it, and never once made me feel the smallness of that. He paid me fairer than fair, better than any human house in Vizima would have paid a clerk of my middling birth. Because Golan paid for loyalty and got it, which the great men never understand is a thing you buy with respect and cannot seize with a writ. He had a rough tongue and a long memory, and a softness he'd have died before admitting. When the plague took my wife 2 winters back, it was Golan who paid the temple for her fire, and said nothing about it after. Because to a dwarf, a kindness spoken of is a kindness spent. 11 years. I'd have said, before that morning, that I had no master nor friend in Vizima I trusted more. We would break bread at the noon balance, him and me, the loaf torn between us over the columns. 11 years of noons. You don't think a thing like that can be undone by a sheet of paper. Then they hand you the paper. It came with the crackdown. You'll have heard the word for it up the hill, securing the city. The scoia'tael were bleeding the roads. Elves with squirrel tails in their caps ambushing the grain carts. And Vizima did what frightened cities always do. It couldn't catch the killers in the swamp, so it turned on the non-humans it could reach. The ones with addresses. The ones with vaults. A guard officer came, and with him a merchant of the quarter, one of Golan's debtors, a man who owed the dwarf more than he'd ever repay, and had just found a way to stop owing. They put a paper on my desk, and the officer was very polite, and the merchant smiled the whole time, and the smile was the worst thing in the room. A denouncement. A sworn statement that the bank had knowingly financed the scoia'tael, that Golan's coin had bought the arrows that killed Temerian boys on the Vizima road. It needed a witness from inside the house, a human witness, a name the court would believe. It needed mine. It was a lie. I want that plain. I kept the books. I knew every coin in and every coin out of that house to the last copper, and not one of them ever went to the swamp. Golan despised the scoia'tael. They had robbed his own caravans, killed a cousin of his on the Mahakam road. The charge was a fiction built to fit a need, and the need was simple. The vaults. A denounced dwarf's holdings were forfeit to the crown, and the crown's officer would skim, and the smiling merchant's debts would vanish in the seizure. And I would have a line on a page and whatever they chose to pay for it. The officer told me what would happen if I didn't sign. Not a threat. He was too well-bred for threats. Just information, laid out like figures in a ledger. The denouncement comes either way, he said. We have other witnesses. And the smiling merchant nodded. Other witnesses, meaning men who would swear to anything. Men whose word a court would take, because a dwarf has no friends in a Temerian court. Whether you sign, the officer said, changes nothing for the dwarf. It changes a great deal for you. And there it was, the lesser evil, dressed in a court hand. I sat with the quill in my hand, and I did the only thing a clerk knows how to do. I made 2 columns. In the first column, if I sign, Golan loses everything anyway. They will seize the vaults whether my name is on the page or not. The wheel is turning. I cannot stop the wheel. All my signature buys is that the wheel doesn't roll over me too. A clerk who refuses a guard officer in a crackdown is a clerk who financed the elves himself by their reckoning. I had no wife left to widow, but I had my own neck and the small life I had built and 11 years of saving in, goddess help me, Golan's own vault, which would burn with the rest of it. In the second column, if I don't sign, Golan still loses everything. The vaults go. The only difference my name makes is to my own soul. And what is a soul worth against a livelihood that's lost either way? You see the trap. That is the genius of how they do it. The clerks who built the machine before me. They make sure the wheel turns no matter what you choose, so that whichever way you go, you can tell yourself you changed nothing. They sell you your own complicity at a discount, and they let you keep the receipt that says it would have happened anyway. And I almost signed. I had the nib wet. I had built the second column carefully, and it balanced, and it told me I was free. Then I looked at the bread. Because here's the thing the 2 columns left out. The thing no ledger has a line for. It would happen anyway is true. But anyway doesn't put my name in the court record. Anyway doesn't mean that when Golan stands in the dock and they read the witnesses against him, he hears Aldous, the man he paid for his wife's fire, the man he broke bread with 11 years of noons. There is a difference between a thing being done to your friend and you being the hand that does it. The wheel turning is not the same as me throwing him under it. The world had already decided to rob him. It had not yet decided to make me the one who would say it was just. I didn't sign. I told them I had kept the books 11 years, and not one coin went to the swamp, and I would swear that in any court they liked. The officer looked at me the way you would look at a sum that wouldn't balance. Not angry, just inconvenienced. The merchant stopped smiling. They took their paper and they went, and the officer paused at the door and gave me the kindness of the truth. It changes nothing for the dwarf, clerk, only for you. He was right. That is the part I have to live with. He was entirely right. They denounced him anyway. Found their other witnesses, just as promised. They seized the vaults, mine in among them. 11 years of careful saving gone to the Crown's officer and the merchant's vanished debts. They put Golan in a cell a while, the way they did with the dwarves that season, to remind the quarter who owned its coin and its mercy both. He passed me on his way to the cell, saw me in the crowd, and he gave me a look I will carry to my own fire. Not gratitude, dwarves don't trade in that, but knowing. He knew there had been a paper. He knew whose name they had wanted. He knew the line was blank. He gave me the smallest nod a dwarf ever gave a man, and it cost me everything I owned to have earned it, and it was the best bargain of my life. I passed a stranger on the way out. White hair, scars, eyes like a cat's in the lamplight, and a dwarf's name on his lips, asking for Golan by it. A friend, by the sound, come about the seizure. I didn't stop him. I had no help left to give. People said later a witcher pulled the dwarf out of that cell, that the great quarrels turned and Golan walked free in the end. His vaults, or some of them, returned. I hope it's true. I never went back to ask. A clerk who refuses the crown doesn't clerk in Vizima again. I lost the vault and the post and the small, safe life. I kept the one thing they offered to buy, and I refused to sell, which was the right to break bread with myself at noon and not taste a man's name in it. They were right that it changed nothing for the dwarf. The wheel turns whether you sign or not. I have made my peace with that. But it changed everything for the man holding the quill. And I have come to think that is the only place any of us ever truly gets to choose. Not whether the cruelty happens, but whether our name is on it. The kings secured their city, and the songs remembered the witcher who freed the dwarf. They forgot the clerk who left a line blank and lost everything to keep it so. The great men get the songs. The rest of us get the morning after. This was theirs.